very blessed.
Yes, yes.
So much,
I
Father.
listen, I haven't had a chance since that phenomenal day, but congratulations on your marriage, your wedding, and your future dynastic life together.
Thank, thank you. I received that. Please send your wife my blessings. With my best friend. Tell her I
That's
miss her.
right.
I can't wait to see y'all soon.
No doubt. I will send her the regards.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this tonight. I am listening. I am so excited. Because when we were in the movie, I told Caleb, I said, I looked over at him. I said, I know we're not supposed to be talking. You got to interview Dr. Kaba. We'll talk after the movie. I was so excited because immediately I'm like, he's the only person I know that can really break this down from start
Wow.
to finish. So I'm honored to hear this tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And good luck, y'all.
I appreciate the faith you have in me, my sister.
Indeed. Baba, first off, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. I never take that lightly. A elder, master teacher from your ilk, your cloth, just making time. I appreciate that greatly. And again, from seeing the film Sinners, which has our whole community, our people, the world having conversations. Again, my wife said she thought about you instantly, seeing those cotton fields, seeing spirituality being utilized, African spirituality throughout the film, seeing hoodoo, seeing so many different variations, power of music, so
Yeah.
many things, Baba. Again, we thought about you, but how did you feel about the film Sinners? I remember, us talking previously of just flowing tonight, but how did you feel of just seeing Sinners for the first time?
Wow. It was very powerful. But Brother Caleb and Sister Sid, if I could just say this
Of
first.
course. Yes, sir.
It is my honor and my pleasure to be here with you,
Mm,
and to be able to share this information with you.
mhm.
Everything I do to pass it down to the next generation.
Yes, sir.
And this gives me the opportunity to do what I say I do. I go around telling people all about this, but you got to do it. You can't talk about it. You just got to do it, man. So for your generation, I just want you all to know it's going to be all right. We got work we got to do, but the work that we are doing now and the work that the movie Sinners did to
Mhm.
have this type of conversation is all part of what Bob Marley says, when he says that how long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it. We got to fulfill the book. So
Wow.
I think what we're doing tonight, and when Sister Sid whispered in your ear in that movie, reach out to Dr. Kaba, she manifested tonight. And like
Indeed.
all sisters do, they keep the brothers in line.
Yes, sir.
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate this time.
Yes, sir.
One of the first things I want to say about Sinners that I think is that the greatest work of art that someone can produce is when they come from their own perspective and they are able to create the type of dialogue amongst those that are watching.
Hmm.
And that you can have 10 people in the room that will give you 10 different perspectives of what they saw in that art, and every one of them is correct.
Mm.
And in many ways, that movie Sinners was what I call moving Meruneta.
Wow.
It was moving hieroglyphs. See, hieroglyphs was carved on stone. I carve on leather. You capture a moment, and a picture speaks 1,000 words, but a symbol speaks 1,000 pictures.
Mhm.
And what Sinners was, when you step back and you don't necessarily go into the ins and outs and the exact things that were going on, when you just look at it, that is what you call a masterpiece in art. Because I've heard so many different explanations, so many different things that was said about that movie.
Mm.
And the multi-dimensional way he did it exercised our brains, because that's really what he did. He was able to take a thought in his head and put it so we could watch it. And as we watched it, all those images was coming up in our head. It's the DNA of our ancestors that touched us in order to see that. The particulars about the movie is one thing, but it's just what that brother was able to do. And the interviews that have come from there and the conversations that Michael B. Jordan had and the other actors, you know, and of course the great Delroy Lindo, okay, was just so powerful because, you know, I worked with his wife who worked for the Schomburg Library at one time.
Wow.
She worked for the Schomburg Library when I was in the Board of Education. And she developed a program. She developed 3 programs that she got grants for. And she was able, one of them was Africans in America. And she developed programs that, and she also developed a program, Harlem, up until 1950. And Sister worked, and I was one of the people that had applied to be part of her grant. And I brought her program into our district to teach our children. So that I was familiar with Delroy Lindo through his wife, Sister Lindo, who was part of the Schomburg Library back in the 90s. And so, you know, again, going back to 1992, we could go through all of his credits for what Delroy did.
Malcolm X, man,
he
was
West Indian Archie.
Man.
Yeah. And the way that brother went from being that brother that, and you know, one of the most important things that he said in that movie was something that I've told children, I've told my own children, I've told people, and it's something that I live by. And that is, your reputation is the most important thing you have. You see, and that reflects what my mother used to teach me. She said, you know, you'll go through life, but the one thing that will remain on the earth after you're gone is the reputation you created amongst the people that knew you.
That's right.
She used to also say, it doesn't take much to sell your reputation, but it takes a whole bunch to buy it back. And so, you know, with these concepts and with the actors themselves and the way in which it was created, the history of it, and then the fact that he could take history and create a vampire movie. But right now, I just want to tell anyone that's listening to this, someone who I consider to be a friend of mine was Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And Dr. Khalid Muhammad came out a number of years ago and he was speaking and he called the Western civilization parasites. And the thing about the parasites is the fact that parasites have no reason to live. Parasites are the undead. They really are undead. They don't have a life. The life they have is feeding on the hosts. A mosquito does not have a purpose to live. It feeds off of the host. And that's its purpose, is to feed off the host and can get the host to believe that the host's job in life is to feed the parasite. And so that's what a vampire is. And so I did research on parasites, and I got a book by a scholar by the name of Carl Zimmer, Zimmer, and he had a book called Parasite Rex that spoke of the history of the parasite and where it is. In science, it's called a free radical. A free radical is the one thing that has no, that really doesn't have a twin. It doesn't have that other part of its existence. It is like Urugu, where Sister Dr. Marimba Ani talks about Urugu being the incomplete one. The Dogon of Mali talk about it, the incomplete one. And the incomplete one is always in search of its twin. See, now we're going back into Sinners with the twins.
That's right. Yep.
You see, not to mention, of course, that our brother, Ryan Coogler, is a Gemini, who is a twin. And so that when you look at the overlapping, see, I was sitting up in the movie house and I was putting things together because I've always enjoyed the concept of the vampire. I grew up watching Dracula. Okay, as a young man, I'm talking about the Bela Lugosi one. Okay. And then as time went on, I started watching other types of movies that developed the concept of the parasite, you know. And so like the hustler. A hustler has no purpose to live. The hustler hustles off of other people. It draws on other people. It's energy, it's life force. And I've known people, you know, that are called energy vampires.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people that feed on your energy. Okay. And even sometimes they will touch you. Okay. And in touching you, what they're doing is that they're trying to receive your energy. That's not all bad now, because there are people who need that. You know, when you're having a day and you hug somebody, okay, you're hoping that that person's energy can through osmosis come to you. That's not a bad thing. But when other people do it for other means or other reasons, then you have a situation. And that is the cornerstone to the title Sinners.
Mm.
It's the parasites. It started with the Ku Klux Klan and it ended with the Ku Klux Klan.
Mm.
But in between that, you had a vampire story. And that vampire story was to feed. But another, like, you know, like we can just talk randomly about certain things, then I'll stop. We can have a conversation.
Yeah. Hey, you're good, Baba.
One of the important things about a vampire that is the original Bram Stoker story of Dracula, Nosferatu, is the fact that they have to be invited into your house.
That's right. Yeah.
And you have to freely welcome them into your house.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept is the fact that Black folk invite wrong people into our existence. And when that happens, that is what gives permission of people to feed on you. And this is why, again, I go back to my mother. My mother was a philosopher queen. She used to always say, be careful who you let in your house. Because once you let them in, it is your obligation to treat them with respect. If you got a problem, don't let them in. And I think about that when it comes to the vampire, because in our lives, we allow people in. And that goes to even our sisters who invite men who will abuse them and then make excuses for them when they are abused. And when they fight back, you know, because there are sisters that fight back, that, well, I didn't know you was like that. You came at me like, you know, just like the vampire. Come at you all sweet and wonderful. We as men allow women into our lives. And this is what has decimated the Black, African, Moor, whatever we want to call it, male-female relationships. We have allowed people into our lives that should never have been there. And one of the scenes with the brother, with the woman who was Black but could pass, was that he had gotten her out of his life. And she was the one that turned him into a vampire. You see? Now, I know when you look back, you know, when you look at the story, well, I should not have gone back. I should have, I had a premonition that this was going to be a problem. And then the other sister, hoodoo priestess, okay, that had that power, you know, and it was just the multi-layeredness of the movie itself was just so powerful, brother. And you know, I'm sure as we get through this conversation, there are so many other types of analogies that we can make, because Carl Zimmer in the beginning of his book says, I know that many of you will want to compare Parasite Rex to humanity, but I'm not writing this book for that. I just want you to know that this is what happens in life. You have free radicals, and free radicals is what causes cancer. Dr. Sebi tells us that, the greatest, we only have one disease. There's only one thing that is a disease, and that is mucus.
Yep.
Mucus that attaches itself to a living cell and doesn't allow the cell to breathe. And when that cell cannot, now think about the vampire. When that mucus, that thick, now there's a good mucus and there's a not good mucus. I'm talking about the not good mucus. It suffocates that living cell and kills it. But then that living cell, being pushed by the parasitic mucus, then attaches itself to another living cell. And then that suffocates that second cell, and then to the third cell, and then to the fourth cell, and pretty soon you have a tumor. And that's the cancer. And so the idea is to always be able to breathe, to always have the oxygen that goes through your system, keep your blood clear, keep your body clear, so that the mucus will be dissolved and will exit when you purge either liquid or solid. It'll purge through your body. And when you think about the vampire, what does the vampire want? What is the vampire after? The vampire is after blood. Now, the blood that the vampire wants isn't red, because blood in your body is blue. It turns red when it's exposed to oxygen. That's what makes blood red. But when you look at your veins, you see nothing but blue. That's what blue blood means. It means you're the original blue blood. Okay, you're the original life system that flows through your body. And then through that concept, you have the idea that this blood has something very important. It is your main transportation system of your body. It carries things throughout your body. It carries the oxygen that you need throughout all your body. It circulates throughout your body. That's why it's called the circulatory system. And then out of that circulatory system, it beats your heart. You see, the heart doesn't beat the blood. The blood beats the heart. You don't die when your heart stops. You die when your blood stops circulating. That stops your heart from beating. That's why you die. The other thing is that, and I learned this from a fifth grader when I was teaching fifth grade, middle school. And we were having a party. And this young lady was Jehovah's Witness. And she explained to me a little bit loud, where the other students could hear, that she could not attend the party, that she could I arrange for her to be excused to either go to another classroom that wasn't celebrating a birthday party, or to the main office or whatever. And I said, sure, we'll work it out. And I remember that some of the children were saying, what kind of religion is that you can't have a birthday party? I heard you couldn't have Christmas, you couldn't celebrate. And so the girl was quite eloquent in her conversation. She was brilliant. Then one student said, I even heard that your mama would let you die before she would give you a blood transfusion. And the little girl explained something. And she said, well, the reason why we don't do blood transfusions is because we believe that your soul is in your blood. And that if you go around getting a lot of blood transfusions, you got a lot of people's souls in you. So it would be better to die than to have other people's souls, because now you're no longer who you are. And pretty soon, if you have enough blood transfusion, you're not the original person that you used to be. So you're someone else's soul. That concept is Dracula, the vampire, is sucking people's souls because of the blood. And where does it go? It goes to although they've not necessarily spoken about it, they go to the neck. But why the neck? Because of the jugular.
Jugular, yeah.
Okay, the jugular, when you mess that up, you live or die. And that's another place where you can't sew that up. So once you puncture that, you're in trouble. So what they go to the heart of your soul. Now let me take you to the judgment scene in Egypt. Because your heart soul is what's measured with the feather of Ma'at. And if you've got a pure heart soul, see the Saku. Saku is where the word psychology comes from. We're under the impression that psychology is the study of the mind, but it's not. Psychology is the study of the soul. Because your heart can't lie. You know how they say, man, your heart can't lie. Well, that's why the heart is judged. Not your brain with what you think. Your heart, because your heart will tell you the truth. And when you're feeling guilty about something, you say, oh man, I have a heavy heart. But when you're feeling good, you say, my heart is light as a feather.
Yeah.
And that's where that concept comes from. So going back to the vampire, see, this is what, see, when you know your history, Brother Caleb, and to the family that's here, when you know your history, you can interpret films from a much different perspective.
Yeah.
You know, you can see it deeper. Why the blood?
Hmm.
Why do they go after your blood? You know, and that is because the blood carries your soul. Because scientifically, when you go to the doctor and you're trying to figure out what's up in your body, what's the first thing you do?
Blood test.
You take a blood test because your blood will tell you everything going on in your body. You'll also take a urine test. That'll tell you things that's going on in your body. Because of the nature of the fact that in blood and in urine are heavy deposits of melanin. In your blood, it's the melanin that keeps you healthy. In your urine, it's the bodyguard melanin that sacrificed its life in order to purge that which your body should not have had in it. So they're like your saviors. And this, again, when you look at sinners, I mean, why sinners? Why the title sinners? Because by nature, we all, to a certain extent, carry a tradition of being on the other road of Ma'at. Ma'at is the righteous road. But when you're not on the righteous road, you're on the other road, which is Ishfet. Ishfet is not the bad road. It's not the good road. But in life, my experiences, how do you know what the good road is if you ain't been on the bad road? Or the road that's not good, I should say it that way. The road that's not good. Because it's on the road of Ishfet that you realize something's up. Malcolm found out he was on Ishfet when he was in prison.
Right.
And what did he do? He went back to the road of Ma'at. And so these are some of the concepts that I see in sinners.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Robert, you said something and it caught my attention instantly. The color blue, that's so significant because in the film, right, Annie, she always wore Hank blue to ward off bad spirits. Her door painted blue. Gullah Geechee culture, they always used Hank blue. If you can, Baba, what did you feel from seeing a strong African spirituality presence throughout the film?
Well, that was the key. For me, the key of the spiritual system on many different levels.
Right.
I'll give you just an example towards the beginning of the movie when he's talking to that young sister that he wants her to mind the car. Okay. Don't let nobody mess with it. Okay. And he said, I'll give you 10 cents. And she said, okay. Okay. The first thing he said was, no, you don't want to do that. That's what I gave you. Now you got to negotiate.
Right.
Okay. That was, to me, that was very spiritual because one of the, and you can bring this up into the present time right now with the tariffs. Okay. One of the things that ushered in civilization in Africa amongst African people, when they were the only people on the planet, was the concept of sharing. That civilized the human family. Because up until then, animalistically, what I got is mine, okay? And I ain't going to share. This is mine. With the exception of mother, who always shares with her babies. Yeah. But the concept is This is mine. I'm not going to share it. But let's say you grow a certain fruit and I grow a certain fruit. I enjoy my fruit. You enjoy your fruit. And I'm watching you enjoy your fruit and you watching me enjoy my fruit. And then I say to you, or you say to me, how about if you give me 3 of those apples and I'll give you 3 of my oranges? I mean, that may not be what it is, but I'm just paraphrasing it. Now you enjoy apples and oranges, and I enjoy apples and oranges. And that's a good trade. There were things I didn't have, and that's where you have supply demand. Yeah. I had a supply of a certain fruit. You had a supply of a certain fruit. The demand was, I want to taste your fruit, and you want to taste my fruit. So sharing was the very first thing that happened. When we perfected that in Africa, the Twa Mbuti Khoisan people of Central Southern Africa, then we took that concept on the road, and that created trade. And that's why Warren Buffett said the other day, tariffs are like war, because now I ain't sharing with you no more. And when you get that type of mentality, you see, this is the cornerstone to our problem. We let people into our land that were vampires, bloodsuckers, who took your apples and my oranges, and then they killed us, or they enslaved us. There was no trade. They took, but didn't give. And that knocked off the spiritual concepts of what trade is. Trade was the first important activity that humans did that brought love between people. Because now I got feelings for you because I'm tasting a fruit that's good. And you're feeling different to me because you're tasting a fruit that's good, that you don't grow. Supply and demand. So the spiritual aspect of just that scene alone, of him saying to her, no, you want a little bit more. So now we're going to negotiate. That's trade. Okay? And in certain ways, that's what a tariff is. Not to mention that the word tariff comes from an African by the name of Tarif in 710 who went into Europe and started to charge a price if you wanted to go in, and that's tarifa. That's where we get the name tariff from, because he was responsible to the African, Tariq, to come back and tell him it's time to go into Spain because you got them Visigoths and Vandals. They are about to strike us. So Africans did a preemptive strike in 711 and went into Spain, and that's the story of Los Moros, or the Moors, that we speak of today. So the spiritual aspect, going back to what you said, my brother Caleb, it's not always religion. It's not religion to me at all. Spirituality is the God-to-God relationships that we have with each other, the energy that we create with each other, the love that we have for each other through the love we have for ourselves. And so the spiritual dimensions then move into other areas like hoodoo, which is a way in which we formalize the celebration of African spirituality. And that hoodoo comes out of the concept because of the nature of voodoo or voodoo, which is the celebration of the spirit of the creator within us. And that's how we bring it out in our ceremonies and in our rituals. And so when Sister was doing those ceremonies, then the idea, remember at the end of the movie, when he's been shot and he's shot up all the Ku Klux Klan and he's laying there yeah. And he's smoking, she appears to him with the baby.
That's right.
And she said, you can't touch him unless you stop smoking. But the smoking was the life that he led before So what she was saying, in order for you to be a good father to my beautiful child, you got to stop being who you are. And you got to come right. And that again is that spiritual aspect of what she was saying. Smokestack, which is interesting. Because smoke is the idea of all the things that smoke travels. A stack is what keeps the smoke under control. That's why it's a smokestack. They're related to each other. The stack exists because of the smoke, and the smoke needs the stack to keep it under control. There's a gospel song that says, "Keep your lamp lit but trimmed." And so that idea of smokestack as twins, you have one that's always out there doing all sorts of things, then you have the one that's disciplined.
Yeah.
They're both the same as twins, but the smokestack, when they're together, is what keeps everything in place. And so the spiritual concepts comes on so many different levels that you eventually get to a point where you can see how it applies to today's world. It applied to today's world because the vampires are out there now, and so is the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
And the question becomes for us, what we going to do? How are we going to react? Are we going to allow them in our home? See, my thing was looking at it from a political perspective. I saw the Ku Klux Klan as the Republicans, and I saw the vampires as the Democrats. And my concept is, I turned 18 the year that 18-year-olds could vote. However, I turned 18 on the 16th of November, and election day was, I think it was the 7th or the 8th day, somewhere in there. It was that Tuesday in November. So I couldn't vote that year because I was not yet 18. I voted the next year. And I have been a Democrat all of my life. It's not to say I didn't vote for Republicans, but I was a registered Democrat. The first thing I did in November on my birthday was I went to get my real ID card, and I became an independent. Now that's in many ways also very symbolic. I'm independent. I don't answer to nobody. I don't trust nobody. And if you want my vote, then you're going to give me what I want. And I say, I want reparations. They say, well, we're going to be thinking about, well, I say, well, after you finish thinking about it, you can let me know what you think, and then you can ask me for my vote. Until then, don't ask me for my vote. Because I'll write somebody's name in. Because we're at a point now where the Democrats, as Malcolm said, are weak, sly foxes. And the Republicans are crazy brute wolves. But they both belong to the dog family. Neither one of them ever made. And the other thing that's so interesting, we spoke about it, is the fact that for the most part, Black folk have always been Republicans.
Yeah.
When you think about Abraham Lincoln and the party and how it was established, 58, something like that, or 1848, why it was formed. It wasn't formed because they wanted to free Black people. It was formed because they wanted to keep the Union together. But that's a whole side conversation. So that the idea of becoming an independent and looking at the vampires that come at you, okay? When I was doing cultural programs in the Board of Education in a school, I had a resource center, and there was a custodial engineer who was of Irish cultured descent. He had a strong Irish brogue, he was definitely Irish. And I remember one time I was down by the time clock, and he came up to me and he said, I just want to tell you this. He said, I sometimes stand outside your door when I'm cleaning the school, and I listen to your classes. And he said, if I closed my eyes, that's what Irish people could say about the British. Because remember, the The Irish were Catholics, and the British were Protestants. And when they came in there, that's why spirituality had so much to do with that story, because what did that vampire who was Irish want? He wanted the music, because the music sets you free. The music is the frequency. The music is as much life as it is anything else. And he was telling them, them Ku Klux Klan, they don't love you anymore. They have, in fact, they destroy you if they could. And they said, they said, quite frankly, I'll tell you the truth. With us, you can live forever. Isn't that what the Democrats tell us?
How ironic. One people. One people. We
Yeah,
are one people. Yeah.
exactly. What you want is what I want, and I'll help you
Yep.
out. But look at the
Yep.
condition we find ourselves in today.
Hmm.
And then you think about Malcolm and Martin. And with all the great work that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King did, which I have much respect for, Malcolm was more precise.
Yep.
Because Malcolm Dr. King fought for civil rights, which are laws made by humans. Malcolm said, no, what you want is human rights.
Human rights, yeah.
Because when human rights come into existence, civil rights automatically apply to you. The fact that women need an equal rights amendment to make them equal, that is proof number one that you're not looked upon as being equal. Because you need a law to make you equal. To have a law that says that you as a human being can vote tells you that you don't have the right to vote. Anytime you have a law that gives you a right, it means that that law can be taken back as easily as it was given. Isn't that what we're experiencing now?
Indeed.
You see? So Malcolm, when he was talking about human rights, he was saying, if we do human rights, that's it. Same thing with the civil rights movement, with all of our brothers and sisters around the world that have come to America to benefit from what foundational Black Americans have done. With everything that we've done, with due respect to them all. I don't like the term, but I am Pan-African. Every atom in my body is a Pan-African. But I use the term Nebu Afrika, which means it's an African term. Pan-African is a Roman term. Nebu Afrika means the same thing, but it's an African presentation of the spiritual forces of Nebu means all, but not only all, but all, the cosmos, the universe, and nature. And Af is flesh or matter. Ra is light and heat energy, and Ka is the spirit that animates light and heat energy in Ma'at and creates life. So Nebu Afrika is a term that I use to represent how I feel towards my brothers and sisters from all around the world. Wherever an African is, Africa is. And wherever Africa is, I'm home. That's my bottom line. When I went to UK, my brothers and sisters treated me with grace and dignity and love and respect. And I gave the back, same thing. Birmingham, UK, same thing. When I went to Holland, same thing. Okay. When I went to Egypt, well, there was some situation, but that was other people. But my brothers and sisters down in Aswan, they say, Nubian, you Nubian. We brothers, sisters,
Wow.
That's how they see. Okay. Everywhere I go, I embrace that. But we have to be clear on what we mean by foundational Black American in terms of the fact that my father's from Alabama and my mother's from Boston. I have a legacy of ancestors that worked the farms and the plantations of the United States. I have a legacy here. When brothers and sisters come from Jamaica, their legacy is Jamaican. They say, and they very proudly and should say, I'm Jamaican.
Right.
From Puerto Rico, I'm Puerto Riqueño. Okay. When I'm from Haiti, I'm Haitian. Okay. And you should be. You should be very proud of who you are. But what about Africans that are indigenous to America? What do we call ourselves? Americans? Come on. Elon Musk is South African.
He's an African American.
He's an African American. I had a student whose parents lived in Kenya, where she was born, and then they came back to America. They were Americans. She got a scholarship as an African American. See, it's a legacy thing. Foundational Black American is a legacy term that we must use for reparations, for one thing. But just for self-identification, we have to use a term because everybody who is of African descent that comes to America, becomes a citizen, is an African American, but they don't have legacy on the plantations of America. You see? And so one of the interesting things is that when in 64 and 65, foundational Black Americans put their life on the line for civil rights, and they got them. But when civil rights was passed, it obliterated immigration laws. So that's where you get the immigration laws from, that allowed people from all around the world to come to America. And everything that they benefited from in America was built on the back, the blood, the sweat, the tears, and the lives of foundational Black Americans. It's just simple like that. Black folk built America. The first persons that were messed up were the indigenous people. What's also very important to understand is that when I say indigenous people, I'm also talking about the Black folk, indigenous people here. The people that we see today, the way in which they look, with the straight hair, with the I don't want to say a yellow complexion, but a less melanated complexion, they are part of another migration, a fifth migration that came to America. And so that when you're dealing with these concepts and you're understanding what's going on, we all have to realize that Nebu Afrika is a term, but don't lose your legacy of who you are as a person. Okay? And understand that being foundational Black American is not being anti-African. Mm-hmm. It doesn't exist. You can be a foundational Black American who is by chance anti-African, but your being anti-African is not based on you being a foundational Black American. Right. It's based on the fact that you just don't like outside people coming in, and in particular disrespecting you. Yeah. You see, and in my discussions I've had with brothers and sisters, I've done 2 interviews in UK so far, and this is one of the topics that they want to talk about. Because I mean, I've had people, Brother Caleb, talk to me in a very disrespectful manner. But they didn't disrespect me because they were Nigerian or Ghanaian or Jamaican or Trinidadian. They disrespected me because they're fools. And there's a difference. Yes, Same thing with religions. I never blame religion for the way people act. I never speak against people of Jewish faith, because you being Jewish did not make you do what you did. Yeah. It's that you're an evil person, and you hide behind your religion in order to do what you do. I don't attack people. Christians did not enslave Africans. Evil people hiding behind their Christianity were the ones that did that. And the same thing goes for Islam. True Muslims do not enslave or disrespect their women. True Muslims do not treat melanated people as enslaved people. You're hiding behind your religion to make excuses for your devilment. And so we've got to move away. I don't hate the player. I hate the game. And once we get to that point, then we can see certain things. And that's what was being played out politically as I watched Sinners. Vote for me and I'll set you free. No, because you've had close to 60 years to do that, and you ain't done it. And every time we come to you for something, starting with the 40 acres and the mule, back in the 1800s, you've always had an excuse. Oh, we need more time. You know, when the Brown versus the Board of Education, you know, in all due time, you know, no, because look at where we are now. Schools are more segregated today than they were back in the days of Dr. King.
Right.
No, you didn't do anything for us. And that's why I'm an independent. Because I'm neither Democrat nor Republican. And you're not going to play that game no more. And be careful, because I got my eye on the Black Panther Party. And you don't want me to go there.
Indeed, Baba. Indeed. One scene that really just had me captivated throughout the entire film, Delta Slim, and that's one of my, arguably my favorite character in that film, Delroy Lindo. Back to him, of course, when they were riding through that beautiful cotton field. That was beautiful scenery. And he's going past the chain gang, right? And then, from driving past them, he gets sad and he talks about his friend who sang with him. And unfortunately, his manhood was cut off. He was lynched. And then Delroy, he gets back to humming, to singing. Why is us protecting Black culture so important, Baba? Because in that scene, I saw so much of sharecropping, convict leasing system, seeing that of young Black men put on the chain gang, Delroy, Delta Slim, talking about lynchings, and then he returns back to his comfort, which was the blues. Why is us protecting our Black American culture so important, Baba?
Medjay. Medjay. Medjay in Kush were the keepers of their sacred legacy. Between the cotton fields and the blues and the humming, I'm going to tell you something about humming, but the idea of the cotton fields and the blues is very important. The piano that brother played was brought into Europe by the Moors. It was the harp turned sideways, encased in wood. And they combined the xylophone with the finger piano. And that became the piano. They encased it in wood. That is why when you look at a piano, most pianos, they are shaped like a harp. And when you look, when you lift up the top and you look inside, that is a harp. Except instead of strumming it with your fingers, you hit it keys that then hit the chords. Right. Okay. When you turn that sideways, the piano is related to the guitar through the chords. When you think of the chordophone, which is any stringed instrument, the bass, the cello, whatever, you then think in terms of the Moors again. And in particular, someone like Ziryab, who brought the lute, L''OUD in Afrabic. I call it Afrabic because to be an Arab, you must be African. That's what makes you what you are. You are a Semite. You're mixed Semi. The chordophone that Ziryab perfected was they had 4 strings. And each one of the 4 strings represented a liquid system in your body. Your blood, your phlegm, your mucus, and your hormones. When you were ill, the doctor was a chordophonist. And what they would do is that if you had blood clots, they would play it so that the string that was the blood took the lead and it would open up for your blood to circulate better. If you were stuffed up with mucus, they would play it over your body so that the mucus would be released. If you were filled with phlegm, okay, or if it was your hormones that you needed to be released through your glands. Well, what Ziryab did was he added a 5th string. And this is like in the 800s. In 822 was when he came out of Asia and came over to Spain. Ziryab, Ziryab. He added a 5th string, and that was for plasma. And plasma is your spiritual liquid. It's your claustrum, 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 which is the Christic oils. You know, when Christ was the anointed one, it represented that sacred liquid that stems from your brain stem and goes down your spinal cord, down through your spinal column and your nervous system, and it brings release to all of the problems that you have. And so in adding that fifth, that was the saku string. That is what solved your spiritual problem, the energy problems, your depressions or your sadness, the challenges that you had in life. And so when I looked at that scene, see, whenever I see a quarterphone, I think of the Moors. Whenever I see a piano, I think of the Moors and what we contributed to music that very few people, I shouldn't say that, some people may not be aware of, that Africans brought that into Europe. They were the ones that taught the Europeans what's called box music, okay? And out of box music, B-A-C-H, Johannes Bach, out of Bach came what we call classical music. And here you have Beethoven, Thoven Bey, a black man from Spain whose family moved to Germany and then moved to Vienna in order to sit. They wanted Ludwig to sit under the tutelage of Amadeus Mozart. And so when I saw that scene, see, this is what I'm thinking about. But what I'm thinking about is as we travel through time and space, we're also traveling through history and geography. Because when they're riding in the car, that's geography, that's space. You're moving. When you're thinking about the time with the cotton fields, you're thinking about time. So you're dealing with the time-space continuum. And then when you deal with humming, the letter M is the only letter we use or sound where our mouth must be closed totally. M, Your lips must be closed. All the other letters, your mouth is open. A, B, C, D, E, Z, K, L, M, okay? You have a section in right behind your olfactory bulb is where you smell. And this, our ancestors were aware of. And when you feel a tickling in your head. There's a tickling. And when I do exercises in this, I always tell people, I want you to locate where that tickling is happening in your head. The area that's being tickled, our ancestors had a name for it, Shittite and Fint, but what it represented was the sacred sanctuary. And it's in that sacred sanctuary that you have a actual physicalness that exists in this water, in this liquid, right behind your olfactory bulb. And what's happening is that that M sound is what percolates. It begins to vibrate. It vibrates in the water, and this water is heavily maintained by melanin, neuromelanin. This area where it's vibrating is where all of your six senses, because we have six senses, not five. Thinking is a sense. And the organ that you use to think is your brain. You have eyes, so you have sight. You have sound, your ears. You have taste, tongue. You have feel, skin, okay? And you have smell, which is your nose. But in all of those senses that are physical, your brain, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your tongue, your skin, each one of those senses has a spiritual sense. You have a third eye. You have a third nostril. Have you ever smelled something that wasn't in the room?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you have two tongues. Have you ever tasted something that wasn't in your mouth? Okay. Your skin. There are sometimes you say, oh, my hairs are standing up on end. That's a spiritual skin. You have two skins. Okay. And so all of your senses, your eyes, third eye, your nose, third nostril, your ears, you have a third ear. When grandma say, you hear what I'm saying? She wasn't talking about with your physical ears. She was talking to your spiritual ear. When mama say, you see what I'm talking about? She wasn't talking about your two physical eyes. And so we have six senses. And when you make that sound of this is why is one of the most important sounds a baby makes. Because that's the first sound a baby makes when he suckles or she suckles at her mother's breast. She makes the sound. That's what makes them be able to suck, is to make that sound. That's why she's called mama, because that is a very key sound that you make when you say when you make the sound When something tastes good, what do we say? Okay. When we hear something that sounds good, we say When we think of a good sound or we think about something, we say Okay. Arsenio Hall used to always talk about that. So that sound M is a replication of all of your senses at its highest level, and the highest level is your spiritual sense. So when grandma had a problem in the family, she would get in a rocking chair and she'd start to rock. What would she start to do? She'd start to hum.
That's right.
Hum.
That's right.
Okay. Because in doing so, she's bringing herself down to that level of consciousness so that she can handle what's going on in her life. So humming is a spiritual. The other thing is that they took from African people something known as the Gregorian chant. And I encourage people to Google Gregorian chant, and you'll hear different sounds. And as a choir boy, because I grew up Roman Catholic, I was a choir boy, we used to sing Gregorian chant. And what Gregorian chant is, it's unlike singing songs, it's the connection of sounds that your body makes. Where So what you're actually doing is that, man, you're messing with your sacred sanctuary there. Because you're taking your whole senses throughout all sorts of places, times and spaces. So you see, brother, when you know your history, when you asked me what I felt when we were going through that cotton field and he was humming and the music was there and he was telling the story of good friends that he had, the brother was really meditating in time and space.
Wow.
He took length, width, and depth and collapsed them into the fourth dimension, which is time and space. And everyone that was able to go with it went with it. But if you don't know your history, you're not going to be able to do it. So in order to win it, you got to be in it. So you got to study your history. Because I know there's a lot of folk that were in that movie house that might not have caught some of the things I was catching.
That's right. Wow. Baba, you were cooking, because Delroy, he stated that was like completely improv, that he just felt it on his spirit. And as well, my mom, her watching it, my great grandmother known as Big Mama, she used to always say, I hum because then the devil, he can't hear what I'm saying. So it's like, wow, that was already like implemented into them, already knowing those things. So yeah, you are completely right about that.
Let's go back to Big Mama for a moment.
Hey, let's do it.
Let's talk about the devil. Let's talk about the vampire. When Big Mama was humming, the devil asked, can I come in? And her humming stopped him. Her humming was what stopped the devil from being able. And when she spoke about hearing or understanding, it was really about coming in. And so that is why the vampire always asks to be invited in. That's why the devil, when he was tempting Jesus, when he was up in the mountain, because like I told you, brother, I grew up Roman Catholic. I spoke Latin better than the priest did. There were priests that used to ask me to serve mass with them because I could tell them how to speak parts of the mass, because this is when the mass was in all Latin.
Wow.
It wasn't in other languages. Everybody spoke Latin, like in Islam, everybody speaks Arabic.
Yeah.
Man, I had that mass down to a T. I knew Ecum Spiritu Tuo. I mean, I could just get all up in that. Okay, so my understanding of these concepts go deep because of my relationship with the Catholic Church.
That's right.
And with understanding certain concepts. And when I left the church, I was a high school seminary. I wanted to be a priest. And I was impacted by Dr. Clark, and I no longer wanted to be studying for the priest. My supervising priest said to me, Booker, that was my name, Booker, I think the church has lost you. Or no, I think the church is losing you. And I said, Father, the church has lost me. And I left and never came back. But if I could correct that, I wouldn't have said the church lost me. I would have said, I've gone into a part of the church that you're not in now. I didn't leave the church. I am more spiritual today than I've ever been. But now that I understand that we are temples, I've now entered into the Shittite infant. I've now entered into the sacred sanctuary. So now I know a spiritual system that goes deeper than the church exists today, or the mosque, or the temple. I'm deeper in my spirituality today than I've ever been in my life. But I don't see it as a religion. It is spirituality before religions. So now I see it as an energy that brings the cosmos together, that creates a Nebu Africa. And understanding that this earth there's room for everybody on the earth. And the moment we are not bit by the vampire, see, you might have avoided the vampire the whole movie, but if he got you the last 10 seconds, you now are a vampire. You are now the undead, and you are going to act like the vampire. And I think that some of us have been infected by the vampire. Yeah. And we are acting like the undead. We are now parasitic in nature, not realizing that, as I've told people in my discussions, that have a lot more material things than me. They have a lot more money, houses. I mean, they got what would be considered a good life. But I say to them, with everything that you have, and with everything that I have, if you and I died on the same day, what are you bringing with you that I'm not bringing with me? You ain't bringing your houses. You ain't bringing them sneakers, them chains. You ain't bringing none of that. I'm not saying that finances don't have a place. They do. But the idea is that when you're willing to sell your soul for that, and you realize that there are children that are going to bed hungry, going to bed without, and you have more than you need, and you're not sharing. The first thing that we did that brought us into the next world was the idea of sharing. All that money you've accumulated, you ain't bringing out one dime with you. So what happens now when you deal with spirituality, when you're dealing with these concepts? And sinners is the idea of where we are as a people, because the real question becomes, who are the sinners? Mm-hmm. And as important, what is a sinner? And even more important, what is a sin?
That's heavy, Bob. That's heavy. In the film too, seeing one particular scene at Club Juke, right? You see Smoke and Stack, and I saw something and it caught my eye, plantation money. And I thought about food stamps till this day, how that's plantation money, EBT cards, and how our people, they would work so hard in those cotton fields. Economically, their money, their cash flow was still controlled in the plantation. All they could do was spend that on the plantation. Seeing that, Baba, economically, how deprived were our people during this time, and those remnants still showing right now in this day.
I see that two ways.
Mm-hmm.
We were materially deprived,
Right.
but spiritually enriched.
Indeed.
And it was the spiritual enrichment that allowed us to get by. Because remember, in the conversation that he had, he said, "Well, that's all they have." I'm going to paraphrase
Yep.
it. He was saying,
Yep.
"Yo, man, we're not going to let one of the twins said, look, man, you got to put the money down. That's it. Okay."
Yeah.
But the other one was saying something else. He was saying that's what they have. Okay.
Yeah.
And if that's what they have, let them enjoy life just like, and again, it goes back to when everything is said and done and you die, what are you bringing with you?
Hmm.
And the idea was the fact that I did a presentation, and at the end of the presentation, at the time I was selling video cassettes. This was back in the day now. I was selling video cassettes. This was before CDs and DVDs. This was back in the day, bro, when it was cassette tape and video cassette tapes of presentations that I'd done. And elder sister, what came up was going to purchase. And she said to me, I really enjoyed your presentation. And, what you shared with me was really so powerful. And she said, I really would like to get that video cassette. She said, but all I have is, like she said, $7, something like.
Wow.
She said, all I have is 7. The video cassettes were 15.
Hmm.
And she said, all I have is 7. And I said, give me 4. And she said, well, I can give you 7. I said, no, I would never take your last money. I would rather take 4, you keep 3. I say, because it's really about the knowledge and the wisdom. And you being an elder and wanting the knowledge, that's more important to me than $15.
Hmm.
And so that was good. What happened is 2 people behind her that were standing, 2 people, another person was there, another person was there, and then there was a sister there. And she came and she gave me $50. And she said, this is not to make up for what you did for that elder sister. This is to tell you how much I appreciate what you did. That is that part of the story there. For me, that's what I thought of. Because there are many times that our people don't have the financial. And when I'm going someplace and we're negotiating price, once I get to a point where I know that I'm either breaking even or I've got some profit, I understand our community. And so my concept is my decision is never about the money. My decision is always about the knowledge and the wisdom. And so if this is what we can do, this is what we'll do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that in that scene because what one brother was thinking was the idea that it's about the money. Okay. The other brother, it was about the experience. And as a people, we have to get back to understanding how blessed so many of us are. We may not have all that money, but we have enough to survive and thrive to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Under those conditions, we have to then set our priorities in a way that our people can also be able to, no matter where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I carry like an envelope with dollar bills because I believe I want to give my money to the brother and sister in the street. Um, I may give money to an organization under certain circumstances, but for the most part, my money goes to the people in the street.
Right.
Now, I know there's a lot of things that they're going to do with that money.
Yeah.
I understand. Okay. But it is the thought that's most important. And that scene told me that that brother understood. Just that's what they have. This has been their struggle. This has been their life. This is who we are. That's as good as anything else. So one was deprived, but one was enriched. And the brother that saw the ability to let them in, to enjoy whatever it was with whatever they had, he was enriched. And the one that was money only, he was deprived. Because what he wanted was what he felt he was deprived of. What the other brother was enriched by the spirit that the person even came out being willing to do what they did.
Yeah. Wow. It's a beautiful breakdown, Baba. One of, I would probably say, arguably everybody's favorite scene was Sammy playing on that beautiful guitar. And I thought about you, Baba, because you have always taught us that we are never alone. We have so many ancestors behind us. And seeing how it showed both the past, present, and the future. How did you feel just from seeing that film? We see Bootsy Collins, some type of look-alike with Parliament, things like that as well. And then we see hip hop. We see our ancient African griots. We see voodoo in there. We see so many different things happening simultaneously. How did you feel from just seeing that film?
What I felt was important about that was in figurative language. Again, this is medu neter.
Right.
I see this as what the Greeks call hieroglyphics.
Mm-hmm.
Moving hieroglyphics, moving medu neter.
Wow.
I think of in figurative language, Dr. Asa Hilliard, great scholar, great historian, right down there in Atlanta.
Yes, sir.
He once said in a presentation that figurative language is ubiquitous to African thought. I had to look that word up, Brother Caleb. Ubiquitous. I said, Dr. Hilliard, can you spell that for me, please? UBIQUITOUS, ubiquitous.
That's right.
I looked that word up. It means it's all up in it. Yeah. It's like asking the question, what part of butter isn't milk? It means that it's all up in there. We are figurative. Hip hop is figurative. When you're dealing with improvisation in jazz or in music or in blues or in rock and roll, that's all in it. It's the same spirit. See, that to me was the key, was that no matter if it was the music of the past, because remember, you're dealing with 1932. You're looking at it in 2025, but you have got to go back in a flashback to be able to sit as if that's the present.
In that moment, yeah.
And see what's happening.
Yeah.
Because in 1932, Ryan Coogler was taking us to the past. And then he was propelling us into the future. When that happened, I think of the children that I've taught culture, African culture, dignity, pride, integrity. They say to me, well, Brother Booker T or Brother Kaba, when I had them at the end of my career, why do I need to go in the past? Why do I need to know this? Why is it important? And I always use the story of the slingshot. You have a sling, and you put something in the sling itself, and you pull it back. I asked the children, well, what's the purpose of the slingshot? And they say, well, you're going to let it go, and it's going to propel. I said, am I bringing you back here to keep you back here? They said, no. I said, well, what's the purpose? The purpose is to go further. I say, if I pull it back this far and I let it go, what happens if I pull it back this far? How about here? How about here? And each time they say, well, whatever's in there is going to go further. And I say, well, now I want to take your mind and I want to put you in a slingshot. I want to put your mind in a slingshot. If I pull you back here, 1492, and I let you go, you're going to go a certain way. If I pull you back to 1965, you're going to go a certain way. But if I pull you back to ancient Africa, to your ancestors, and I pull you back this far, how far in the future will I fling your mind? Brother Caleb, you should see their faces. And not only that, but I took my grandson, I used to take my grandson every Friday. We used to hang out. Shari, my wife, his grandmother, myself, we used to hang out every Friday. And we used to go to Toys R Us or one of the stores, and I would give him a little something because he was doing so well in school. Caress, I call him. And one time, like he liked the Nerfs, and I found a slingshot Nerf. So I used the Nerf slingshot to explain the story to the children because oh, that's a Nerf? Oh, can I use it? I said, wait a minute, I didn't bring it in here to be shooting. I brought it here to tell you a story since you asked me.
Yes, sir.
And so the concept is that scene was like a slingshot that Ryan Coogler held up to us in 1932. And the further he brought us back, you see where the sling is, where the stick is in the present. So the more you pull it back, the further in the future you go. So when they had all those dances and the African traditions and all of the other things in it, you're pulling it back. And the further back you go beyond the cotton fields, when we were home by ourselves, with ourselves, and then you propel it, it becomes hip hop. It becomes what's going to come after hip hop. And so that scene in and of itself, almost in the middle of the movie, before, that's what drew the vampires to them was the music.
How about
and the
that?
music was the frequency. The vibration is what brought them there. But the frequency was what they wanted, and that's why they wanted the music. Because the music is a cosmic expression of supreme love. And just like they used the cordophone to heal the body, they have a saying that says that music heals the savage beast. Wow. How about when you're having a rough day and your favorite song come on? When you're listening to the music is more than entertainment. And Africans did not do music for entertainment. They enjoyed it, but it wasn't for entertainment. It was life. It was vibration. And in the dancing, everybody could get on one chord and be one with the universe and the vibration. This is what dances are, you see. And so when you have this experience, it takes you to another level. And then when you bring your voice into it and you start to sing, you have another. And then when you have people on the side that ain't singing, but they humming, they're taking you into the sacred sanctuary. Sure. And so that scene is like the slingshot. Mm-hmm. It takes you to the past, and the further in the past you go. See, because prophets are not psychics. They're just good historians. Because when you know what happened in the past, you can interpret what's happening in the present, and you can predict what's going to happen in the future. When it happens, everybody thinks you're in the Twilight Zone. Everybody thinks that it's something supernatural. It is supernatural, but it is super, 2 words, supernatural. They think it's extraordinary, 2 words. It's extraordinary. See, because there's nothing supernatural about life. It's just natural at a super pace. It's not extraordinary. It's ordinary with a little bit of extra. Because when you start separating yourselves from the dynamic human family, you begin to think that you are somebody that you really are not. You think you're a star. And you see, the thing about a star is that it's too far away to touch. Everybody's a celebrity. Everybody wants to be celebrated. I went to a conference in Atlanta a number of years back, and it was called the Gathering of the Masters. And my brother Delbert Blair was there. Bobby Hemmett was there. Phil Valentine was there. Jewel Pookrum was there. Neely Fuller was there. Okay. Asa Hilliard was there. All the heavyweights were there. And when I was listening to the promotion of this, it was titled The Gathering of the Masters. But once the event came, it was in 2 days. Once the event came, the first thing that the brother that had organized it said to the people that was there, I know that you see, because we were all in the front. Everybody was going to present was in the front. And he went through all the names of the people that were there. He said, I know that when we called it the Gathering of the Masters, I know you think that these are the masters. And they said, yeah, they are the masters. But the gathering of the masters includes you. You are the masters that decided to take time out of your weekend to be here. You are as much a master as anyone that's in the front of you right now. So the gathering of the masters, this is what I mean when I say extraordinary and supernatural. See, we're living in a world of Western civilization that's the Ice Age mentality. And I think that this is part of what Sinners was really rooted in, is the fact that everybody wants to be the first of this, the best of this. Okay. And the fact of it is that even if you're good at what you do, you're not the best. You're the best of who you are. But somebody else doing the same thing could be just as best as you. You're the best as it relates to you. So it comes back to the fact that I don't compete with other people. I'm very comfortable with who I am. I compete with myself. I pray every day that I am a better person that woke up than the person that went to sleep. And that when I go to sleep, I pray that the person that wakes up and has his day will be better than the person that went to sleep. So my competition is not to be better than someone else. My competition is to be a better person for me. And then in cooperating with somebody else, I know, Brother Caleb, that whatever I may do for you, whatever you may do for me, I know my support of you makes me better. Your support of me makes you better. So therefore, it's in my best interest to do as much for you, Sister Sid, my wife Sherry, my son, my daughters, all. It is in my best interest to do the best I can for the people I come in contact with, because it'll make me a better person as to being the first or the only. That's what all these award shows are about. You see, because in my mind, when I look at award shows, it's kind of hard to understand how anybody could think that they are the best of the other four. But see, this is cancel culture. This is what cancel culture is in the Western world. In order for somebody to feel good, four other people got to feel bad. And then they got the nerve to thank God for allowing them to win. Because what does that say? How does God feel about the other four?
Wow.
Are you telling me that God don't like those other four, but God love you and that's why you won? That thought troubles me, Brother Caleb.
Wow.
Sinners. Sinners. But who are sinners? But more importantly, what is the sin? Because what could be a sin could be a blessing. There are things that happen in my life, Brother Caleb, that I thought it was the worst thing that could have happened. I thought it was a curse on me. At times I wondered, what did I do to get this? But now that I am where I am, looking at that event, it was a blessing. And everything that has happened in my life, and this is what I tell people, everything that has happened in my life, everything that happens in your life, no matter what it is, have no regrets. Because whatever it was that happened was what brought you to be here today. What did you learn? Winners never lose. They either win or they learn how to win next time. You don't lose when you don't get what you want. You lose when you don't try. That's why I used to always tell my students. You don't lose. You know, if I ask a question and you don't get the right answer, you're not wrong. Because that's why I always say, you're on the right track. Because the reason why you're on the right track is because you tried. I don't hold you accountable for knowing everything. But if you tried, I respect that. And so in my classrooms, there was always that freedom not to be accurate. Because that's what I say. I don't say you're wrong. I say you're not accurate. I tell people all the time, with the work that I'm doing, I'm right, but I'm not accurate. Because when I hand this information to you, you're going to take it to the next level. That's why when I see some of the young brothers and some sisters that are putting down the elders that came before them that did this work, you know, the great scholars of the past, John G. Jackson, Chancellor Williams, Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, Ivan Van Sertima, for the information that was available for them, they did the best they could. My generation took what they did to the next level. The next generation is going to take what I'm doing to the next level. But every generation has its own geniuses. It's not that you're more genius in another generation. It's that you're standing and sitting on the shoulders of those that came before you, and therefore you can see things that, imagine you being on someone's shoulders and looking out. You can see things that the person that you're standing on can't see. But it's because you're on them that you can see it. And when we get that sort of kind of concept in our mindset, then we can open up to understand that every generation does the best they can with what they have. And so have no regrets. There are some things that Dr. Ivan Van Sertima put out there that Dr. David Imhotep took to the next level. There are some things that Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop put out there. Dr. Ivan Van Sertima took it to the next level. And so each generation takes the work of the one before to the next level. Sinners. See the concept? Yeah. Taking it to the next level. Because when he was willing to sacrifice himself for his brother to live.
Yeah.
Okay. That is the sacrifice of a Tsar. That's the Osarian drama. Because one brother was a Tsar and the other brother was Heru, the resurrected brother that took it to the next level. And so this is, you know, this is when, and again, I think the most important thing, I think, that could come from this movie, Brother Caleb, is that when you know your history, when you know what happened in the past, you can interpret what's happening in the present, and you can predict what's going to happen in the future. When I sat and watched Sinners, I saw things in that as it relates to my knowledge of the past. How many people know about hoodoo?
That's right. Yeah, very few.
But you know, Richard Pryor was talking about it.
Yeah.
He had Miss Rudolph. Yeah. He had Miss Rudolph with the monkey. And he used to man, that was the fun. And you're going back to the 70s when he would talk about Miss Rudolph, who was working the roots.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody laughed. They thought it was witch doctor and things. But Richard Pryor would put it in there. Like people would come to the house and get uncomfortable with the monkey being there. Miss Rudolph would say, well, the monkey live here. You visiting. You know, and the stories that he would tell about Miss Rudolph was just brilliant. So that, how many of us know about hoodoo? How about Scream, Blackula, Scream? So the movie Scream, Blackula, Scream, that was all about hoodoo.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, from Blackula, Blackula came out the same year Superfly came out, 1970.
I was just about to ask you about that. Yep. Blaxploitation and all of that. Yes, sir. Got you.
Okay, Blackula with William Marshall came out.
Yeah.
I started teaching high school in Gary, Indiana.
Home of Michael.
Huh?
Home of Michael
That's
Jackson,
right.
huh?
And I used
Yeah.
to pass his house. His house was right behind the high school I taught, Roosevelt High School, all black high school.
How
But around
about
the
that?
corner from where the Jacksons lived was where William Marshall lived.
Hmm.
And he was still alive at the time. I was hunting him down. You know, like I didn't want to think that, I didn't want him to think that I was like stalking him or something like that.
Right.
But because Blackula was something else, brother.
Yeah.
You know, this is 1977. I'm in Gary, Indiana. I had students whose older brothers and sisters were friends with the Jacksons.
Wow.
I mean, they told me stories about the Jacksons as a family. In fact, I have I have a documentary out on Gary, Indiana, where I'm outside the house with the Jacksons and I'm outside William Marshall and I'm telling this story about, man, I was hoping that he wouldn't think I was, but I admired him because of the way that he played Othello. You know, I mean, I think that he was singularly, I'm not sure about Denzel Washington's portrayal of it on Broadway now, but William Marshall was the best because in college, I taught Othello when I taught the Moors. I had a class on the African presence in medieval Europe. And I taught the classics. I taught a book written by Alexandre Dumas. And everybody looks at the Three Musketeers, everybody looks at the Man in the Iron Mask, but he wrote another book. And this book was very important. It was called Georges, Georges. I didn't do Three Musketeers. I didn't do Man in the Iron Mask or any of those others that everybody know. I did Georges because Georges was in honor of the brother that was the fencer. They came out with a movie about the brother. Okay. And Georges. Okay. And this is about a young black boy who's of mixed heritage living in France. And this was the story. And Georges, when Alexander Dumas, the first one that came from Haiti and went to France with his father, Thomas Alexander Dumas wasn't born. So Georges was elder to Alexander Dumas, the father. And they made a pact that they would not fence each other because they both were the best fencers in France. Wow. So they didn't want two black men to be fighting each other. And so this story, Georges, is about what happens to a African-based, because Chevalier Saint George, his mother was from Martinique. She was a black woman from Martinique. In the movie, he brings her to France. If you saw the movie, he brought his mother.
I did watch the movie. Yes, excellent film.
Okay, his mother, he brought her at the end when he was trying to get back into the black world.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, but because until then he was the fencer, he was the violinist, he was a number of different things. So I taught Georges as a book to expose that story to the students. Mm-hmm. But Othello was not just about a black general with a young Desdemona. It was a story of ageism. It was not just that he was black and she was Italian, Venetian. It's that he was pretty elderly when they got married. Desdemona was a child of a politician in the Senate in Venice. And Othello was a celebrated general. I mean, when he stepped on the land, everybody came out and welcomed him because he was fighting in the wars on behalf of Venice. And he would go and visit this particular senator, leader, politician. Desdemona was a little girl. And she would sit there in amazement of Othello. See, this is the backstory of Othello. And she got a crush. She fell in love with this man who was much older than her. I mean, when she was like 3 or 4, he was like 45. So when she became 18, 19, 20, he was in his 60s. But she had such a crush on this black man that told these stories. They got married, but he still carried the paranoia of her being in love with a younger man. See, this is the other side of these stories that you got to get into to really understand. Not only was it about he was black and she was white, and the paranoia that he had with Iago and Cassio, it's that even when you look at it, the people that betrayed him didn't have a problem with him. They had the problem with the younger person. That's why they put them together, because he was jealous that Othello was with this other person of European descent. So in order to get them out the way, he made Othello angry, not realizing that the real anger would then be put on himself, which would make him kill Desdemona. So it just wasn't about black and white. It was about young and old. Ageism. You know, when an older man marry a younger girl,
yeah,
okay, you're gonna have some situations when you ain't going to the dances like you used to do. When you ain't gonna be able to do the things that you used to do.
right.
And so this is the other part of the story of Othello. Sinners.
Wow. How about that, Baba? Ageism. Think about Delta Slim, right? He's elderly, older. Sammy, much younger, but he's
Right.
willing to show Sammy all the ropes, willing to guide him. How do we try to deconstruct ageism in the Black community where younger folks are learning from our elders, master teachers? Master teachers are learning from the younger people. How can we start to do that?
My thing, there is a group in Michigan that reached out to me and said they would like to create like an elder council. But I think what's important is that the elders know better because of their experiences. But every old person ain't an elder.
Indeed, yes.
And there's only one thing worse than a young fool, and that's an old fool. I believe for me, as I have interacted with you, been there, enjoyed our fellowship, when you spoke to me of how much you appreciated in the beginning of this conversation, when you spoke about the honor, and I came back to you and said, it is mutually my honor to be here with you. They say it takes a village to raise a child. That's half the story. Because it takes a child to raise a village. It is up to us as elders to be there for our younger brothers and sisters when they request support. I believe that my generation, caught up in what they were caught up in, because I know what they were caught up in, because I was caught up in it too. But I saw that my contribution would be in education, working with the children all my life. We're coming up on 48 years now.
Wow.
Okay, from 1977 to 2025. Okay.
Hey, that's a full lifetime, Baba.
Oh, yes. I've taught every
Yeah.
grade. I've taught every subject. Taught college.
Yeah.
I taught in prison. I taught in penitentiaries. I taught in community center, martial arts centers. Okay. I've done interviews with good brothers like you, Caleb, and Sister Sid, your counterpart, who makes you the great person that you are, as you make her the great person she is. Okay. To celebrate that, to work with that. It's up to the elders, I believe, because the younger people have been thrown into a world that they really, if the elder isn't there in the village, the child is going to reflect that. And so when people say to me, what's wrong with the children? I carry in my my vest, I carry a mirror. And whenever someone says to me, what's wrong with the children? It's two-sided. One is a magnifying side and one is a regular side. And I showed them both. I said, you want to know what's wrong with the children? Look. Do you want to see what they're going to become? Then I give them the magnified side. Because they're going to be you 3 times your size. So the way to answer your question, the way it is that we have to first construct what an elder is and what a responsibility of an elder is to the village.
Right.
Because I'll be honest with you, bro. In politics, in business, there's too many old folks.
I agree, Baba. I agree.
In politics, when you be seeing people going to sleep, no, you got to get out.
Yeah.
Brother, when I turned 55, I hit 31 years, 3 months, and 15 days in education. I was the first generation of teachers in New York City that got paid $100,000 a year. I was the first generation. That was in 2008. But in order for me to retire at that amount of money, I had to be in that position for a full year. That salary kicked in May of 2008, the $100,000. For me to retire, I had to stay until May of 2009. Okay. So I covered myself because I'm thinking about my wife, my family, because my retirement is, if anything should happen to me, creator forbid, what I receive as retirement fund will go to my wife for the rest of her life.
That's right.
Okay. I take a reduction of the amount of my total amount in order to make that happen. The salary that I was making, you could hire 2.5 teachers for what I was making. And I said to myself, it's time to let younger people get into the system. And it's time for people like me to get out, but not without a plan. Because it was right after that. If you think of 2009,
I know. Yeah, I thought about that.
2011. Okay, because the creator worked for you now, because if your heart is right, then the creator will make a way for you.
Yes, sir.
Not to mention the books that I've written since then and the other experiences that I've had. And so what I'm saying is that elders have got to become consultants to the younger people, like what you and I do. You know, whenever there's something to discuss, we discuss it. I give my view, I give my understanding, which consolidates your ideas. But then when you talk to me about your feelings, that is what reciprocally takes me to the next level, because I know what your thought is through your generation and what your experience, and with Sister Sid, what she's experiencing, and with all the group that comes through, you know, Brother Gifted C and the others, you know, Chase and all the other brothers and sisters that's coming through this process. My working with them helps me understand where we have to go with this work. But I do believe it starts with the elder, because we've been through this. We know the pitfalls. We know the challenges. So I say to young people, I say, you know, I fell in that pit before. I'm going to show you the way to go around it. Okay. Right. If you listen to me, you go around it. If you don't listen to me, you'll fall in, and then you'll have to learn how to get out. But if you listen, then you'll go around it. But first and foremost, I have to be willing to talk to you about that pit you're about to step in. So I believe that, in answer to your question, the elders have to create the position for your generation to sit on the throne. Here's a key. When you look at all of the dynamic kingdoms of Kush Kemet, it is the preceding, for instance, the 18th dynasty is a phenomenal dynasty. Akmose is going to be the first pharaoh, or Neset Biti, to sit on the throne of the 18th dynasty. But it was his father and grandfather Sekenere and Senanctere Tao, that ended the 17th dynasty, that allowed Akhmos to create the first dynasty. Okay, when you get into the 25th dynasty, Kashta, who is the father of Pianki, Shabaka, Shabataka, and Taharka. Kashta was the one that started but ended the 24th dynasty. And it was his son Pianki that started the 25th dynasty. So that's how I see what we have to do. It is this generation of elders that's going to end this era so that your era can start the next one. And your generation will be able to do it because of what we're doing as the elders. So that it is the elder of the preceding dynasty that ends it, that allows for the younger generation to pick up the baton and start a new dynasty. And now it's time for a new day. And it's happening as we speak. As we talk right now, this is what we're doing. It takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a child to raise a village. It's two-way. Every system that I've studied in the ancient world, I'm going to focus on Africa. Everything that the working group, let's say from 18 to 55, if I could give that number, or 60, everything that they do is to create the type of civilization that will allow their children to become better than them. Not like them. Certainly not worse than them. Better. Better. So when you sit on the shoulders of those that came before you, you can see the world on a higher level. Because like when you sing, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. You begin with do and you end with do. But the second do is at a higher octave. And so it's up to us, starting with do, to take us through re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. But you're the next do. Your generation is the next do. The young people are the next do. But you're at a higher octave because you're able to see things that I could not see because I'm here, but you're on my shoulders and you're looking out over me. You're in a better position to see. That's our job. We must create an elder, but the elder must be an elder and not an old fool. And we have to be able to discriminate what an elder is from a senior. I mean, I say it in jest, old fool, but really what I mean is a senior person. Because we have seniors that are not fools. They just have not contributed to the village. And I understand why. Brother, we are all hurt by matter of degree. All of us are. We're all hurt by matter of degree. And when you find your weakness, you find your strength. Some of my strongest strengths were my weakest weaknesses. But you have to own that weakness. You have to recognize it. When I got out the military, I registered for the VA benefits. There was a sister that was my counselor. She worked for the veterans and she worked for the school, really. She worked for NYU, New York University. And she was part of the VA benefits. And she saw me. I just got out the military. Before the military, I was a cub in the Black Panther Party. And I was a young brother that grew up during the Civil Rights Movement. And I had challenges. I wanted to kill white people from my experiences as a young person being impacted by this experience. And she picked it up. Maybe in some of the things I said, maybe some of the things that I did, she could have picked it up and she said, brother, are you interested in going to counseling? And I was smart enough at that time to understand. I stuttered and I stammered, man. My face was broken out. I was a young brother, grew up in a project, facing certain things. And so I went to counseling for like 2.5, close to 3 years. I went to counseling to work out this. And this is why when I see people talk about mental health and things like that, if you are a Black person in America, you need help to talk to somebody. And you have to be strong enough to know that it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. If you can identify it, there's something right with you. And if you go to the right person, because she hooked me up with a brother. And this brother took me through process. And he held the mirror up to my face. And I looked at myself. I had done quite a few things up until that point in my life. 1974, going into 1975. And this is why I so identify with our people. Because I was once there. I know what that was like. And I just want to, I see our young brothers out here. And I know what they're going through. When I'm going to the garage, they call me Pops, Unc, Goat. They call me, this one brother that had, that really, we talked occasionally about things. One time I was coming back, I was coming home, and he said, man, you know something, man? You are the GOAT. And I didn't say anything because we gotten along so well. See, because to me in my generation, GOAT, was an old GOAT.
Yeah.
You're old GOAT. And so, I got up and I called my son and I say, yo, tell me something, man. Like, what does GOAT mean? I said, this young brother called me a GOAT. He said, no, Dad, that ain't nothing wrong with that. That means the greatest of all time.
Of all time. That's right.
And so with the younger generation, that's how they help me, guide me, because the one thing about kindergarten children, man, is that they'll tell you about yourself. If you ever want to know yourself, really know yourself, more so than being around elderly people that'll tell you the truth about yourself, be around young people. Elders will help you out too. But the younger people, 4 and 5 years old, they're too pure to tell you an untruth. So they'll tell you about yourself. Some of my greatest lessons I learned came. But it was those 2.5 to 3 years of counseling that I experienced with the right person that really took me through the process, that helped me. This is why I tell Black folk, if you're having mental situations, go to counseling. Yeah. It's rough. And particularly Black people. And Black women as much as Black men. Find somebody that can help you. Find somebody that you can talk to. It don't have to be a psychiatrist, a social worker, or a psychologist. It could just be somebody that you trust. This is why bartenders and hairstylists are our community's psychologists. That's why they have movies about bars and the people that go into bars, and they have movies, barbershop, beauty salon, beauty shop. Yeah. Because a lot of stuff happens there. Because a lot of people can be who they want to be. And so, my thing is, as an elder, we have to be that counseling, and having gone through it and understanding the process, you can talk to them. You can talk to a young brother. Young brother, I don't mean disrespect, but I see what's happening here. And if you can just give me a moment of your time with respect, I'd like to talk to you. May I talk to you for a moment? That's how I approach it. In the street, when they're ready to rumble. Just the other day, there was a situation happened. I was on my way to the garage. And I saw what was about to happen. And then I stopped. I didn't say anything because I knew that one of them had gotten another brother upset. And it was time to rumble. And I just stopped and I watched. And I watched because in case the police came, I wanted to be able to, at least, if something broke, I at least wanted to be able to be there as an adult, as opposed to just the children alone. And I know a lot of the police in the neighborhood, so they know me. And so what might happen to those young brothers if I were not there, you know, would not happen if I was there, because I could intercede, you know. But this is what the elders have to do. We have to earn that throne that we sit on. And it has to be sisters as well as brothers. Although I think that men play a very important part, because sisters are already on the throne. They do so much now. They sit on their throne and the man's throne at the same time sometimes. And so we have got to do it not just for the children, but for our sisters, because they need help too.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let them have to do this all by themselves. So that's what I think about the eldership, which I think is very important. And of course, I accepted that position, or at least the beginning of the conversation of it, because it has to be a conversation. Because there are elders that are very good people, but they don't get along.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible to be a good person and two good people don't get along. It's chemistry. There's a chemistry that sometimes people turn other people off. And so we've got to learn. I mean, I work with people who can't stand me. And quite frankly, I can't stand them either. But it's not about my personal feelings. It's about the task at hand for our community.
Yes, sir.
And I've worked with people that can't stand me and I can't stand them. And we've got the job done. I would like to tell you, Brother Caleb, that after it, we could get along because of our working together. No, we still couldn't stand each other. We went our separate ways, but the job got done for the community.
Wow.
And so we've got to be, and there were times that they had to tell me what to do. And I obeyed because what they said was right. And there were times that I had to tell them what to do. Good people just can't stand each other. It's human nature. It's part of it. We have to learn how to get beyond that personal thing. We're too much into the personal. It's the job for our community.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful breakdown, Baba. In the climax of the film, one thing that got everybody talking was Brother Sammy was dumped 3 times, similar to a baptism by Remick, the OG vampire, if you will. And also, Sammy thought by saying the Lord's Prayer that would save him. But then Remick, he also recited it as well. What I found so ironic as well, Baba, was a film entitled Sinners comes out on Easter weekend. The Pope dies. Today, a new Pope was elected. So that's even crazier timing while we're filming, talking about this. But overall, Baba, does Christianity work for our people? Because seeing how Sammy tried to think that reciting the Lord's Prayer would save him, Remick, a vampire, a demon, also knew Lord's Prayer as well. Does Christianity work for our people, Baba?
Let me tell you something about the Lord's Prayer first.
Okay.
Then we can get into the response.
Of course.
Lord's Prayer is really written on the papyrus of Ani. And it is in praise of the god Amun. And literally says, "Our Father Amun, who art in Amenta, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, as above, so below." Okay? As it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth. That is the papyrus of Ani. That's where Christianity came from. And at the end of the prayer, it says, Amen. And that's where Christianity got the ending of the prayer, Amen. Amen is the hidden aspect of the Creator. Amenet, his wife, is the revealed aspect of the Creator. And there are 8 different essences. and Amen is the hidden. And it is written in the papyrus of Ani. So when he did the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Actually, and I don't know if Ryan Coogler, that's why I said to you the other day, I want to talk to Ryan Coogler's mind.
Yes, sir.
Because I want to know, does he know that that actually is an African script out of the Book of the Coming Forth Today by Night and the Papyrus of Ani? You can buy the Papyrus of Ani. Ani is the spiritual aspect of an individual. For instance, there's a prayer in Meduneter. Okay. Rein temer tat satep samayefem nechezet. Okay, that's the beginning of it. And that is it means the chapter of not letting the head of one be carried away from them in the next world. Okay. And basically it says, I am the great one, son of the great one. I am fire, the son of fire, to whom was given his head after it had been cut off. The head of Asar was not carried from him. Let not the head of Asar Ani be taken from him. Now, what that means is that the head of Asar was not taken from him in this life, which means that as a living person, you were a God on earth and you kept your consciousness. Okay, you go back to the prayer. Let not the head of Asar Ani be taken from him, which Ani is the spirit. After you've deceased, you become Ani. So Asar is the living, Asar Ani is the dead. So that you have Asar Ani. What it's saying is that, hey, listen, Brother Caleb lived a beautiful life on earth. He did everything he was supposed to do. Let him live that beautiful life in heaven, as above, so below. As he lived it on the earth, let him live it in the heavens. The Papyrus of Ani. So when I heard that prayer, because you know your history, you know he was reciting an African prayer. I just want to know if Ryan Coogler knows that. Okay. And so the idea of Christianity in spirituality before religions, my brother Caleb, one of the things is I don't put down any religion and I don't put down anything that people believe in. Because I know for a fact that Christianity is the Amen priesthood. I know that Judaism is the Aten priesthood. And I know that Islam is a combination of the Amen priesthood and the Aten priesthood. I know that Buddhism came from Africa. I know that Confucius came from Africa. I know that Zoroastrian came from Africa. I know that every spiritual system and every script that was uttered and written came from Africa. I don't have a problem with the scripture or the word. I have a problem with the interpretation of it. Because Christianity was given to us as a slave mentality. It was given to us to enslave us and to make the European God and the slave the subservient one. It was written in order to make the African believe that no matter how bad life was for him on earth, he would be able to receive great compliment in heaven. So the worst his life was on earth, he would say, well, I'm going to have a great afterlife. Okay. So the religions enslaved African people. So I don't have a problem with the scripture. I can show you where the Eucharistic feast came from in the pyramid texts. I can show, in fact, in the book Spirituality Before Religion, I take you into the pyramid text and show you where it's written about the eating of the body and drinking of the blood of the gods. Not literally, but if you participate in the ingestion of the divine, you are what you eat. You become the divine. So it wasn't about eating the body and drinking the blood, because that's cannibalistic vampirism right there. It is symbolic of what happens when you dine of the creator. You are the creator. And if you dined of the creator on earth, if you did the great things that the creator asked you to do, then in death, you would then resurrect yourself and be able to capitalize on the good life in the afterlife like you capitalized it on the earth. But I tell folk that Jeremiah Kamara, brilliant brother, out of Atlanta, Jerry Kamara, Kamara once said that a spiritual, well, first Amos Wilson said that a good organization solves its people's problems and meets its people's needs. What Jeremiah Kamara said was that when a spiritual or a religious system no longer solves your problems and meets your needs, it's like carrying the boat on your back after you cross the river. The boat was very important getting across the river. It got you across. This past Easter Sunday, I did a Instagram Live on this topic of how much I respect Christianity, because the story of this Jesus the Christ allowed so many of our ancestors to be able to bear what they had to go through every day. Had they not had something to tenaciously hold on to, they might have committed suicide. They might have done something to end their life. Under those circumstances, some of us might not be here today. It was because of their tenacity and love, in particular of this religion, that allowed them to be able to continue their life. But now that we've crossed the river, if you keep carrying that religion on your back, it becomes a burden. And so we have to understand that. I learned it when I was 14. Dr. Clark taught me that. Christianity, particularly since I wanted to be a priest, was a burden on me. It was something that I carried with me that was extra baggage. But what happened was, instead of me dropping the bag of Christianity, I emptied it of Christianity and I put African spirituality in. And not only was that a lighter bag, it was a beautiful bag. And so when I think of the Lord's Prayer and when I think of religions and Christianity and Islam, the Islam that some people practice is not Islam. The people that practice Christianity, that's not Christianity. That's not what Christ said. You know, Vladimir Putin said that teachers start wars. Because when you teach the people rise to truth. They say that Jesus was a carpenter, but I never heard he was building a house. I didn't even hear him build a table or a chair. But they did call him teacher. And that's why they crucified him, symbolically. They crucified him because he was a teacher. They crucified him because he could take 3 fish and 5 loaves of bread and feed a whole stadium, just like our grandmothers used to do in our neighborhoods.
Come on. Yes, sir.
Lazarus, Asar. Jesus brought Lazarus back to life. Just like a teacher can bring a mentally dead person back to life. That's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did with Malcolm. Malcolm was mentally dead. Okay? But like Lazarus, Elijah Muhammad brought him back from the pit of death. That's the power of a teacher, a good teacher. But even teachers have their ways. But that's what a good teacher does. It can bring the dead back to life. And that's what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did. That's what the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey did. That's what Booker T. Washington did. He brought the dead back to life. And that's what a good teacher does. You bring the dead back to life. And so, for me, the religions themselves are not the problem. It's the interpretation of the religion that's the problem. Because all religions came from Africa, and Spirituality Before Religions is a book that cascades through all the different religions, but I show it to you on the walls and of the papyri and on the coffin text of African people. And that's where it came from. The idea of resurrection, the idea of being flight bound, is the story of the caterpillar. The caterpillar born as an insect on the ground and walks on the ground. And its job is to find a good tree to live around and to eat leaves. And it's important to eat the right leaves, because when you eat the right leaves, then you put yourself in a position when it's your time to do what you got to do, to transform yourself. You then can spin the proper chrysalis or cocoon. If you don't eat the right leaves, the caterpillar will not be able to do the cocoon and will die, earthbound. But if, and when the caterpillar eats of the good leaves, lives a good life, reads the right books, eats the right food, associates with the right people, listen to the right music, then you can spin your cocoon when you are a sa or a mummy, because that's what a mummy is. A mummy is the caterpillar's cocoon. And inside the cocoon, the caterpillar literally transforms itself from an earthbound caterpillar into a flight-bound, beautiful butterfly. And once you come forward from the cocoon, you no longer are eating leaves, but the sweet nectar of the plants and the flowers of the earth. And that's what the mummy was. The mummy was transformed in the mummified form into the Ba, the spirit that had wings. And that's why you see all the saints and you see Christ have wings. But above their head is a halo. But at one time, the halo was the sun behind their head. They just flipped the sun up, put a hole in it, and called it a halo. It still comes from the word helio, which is sun.
That's right.
This is our story. And if properly interpreted, it's a beautiful story, you know. That's why I say I didn't leave the church. I went deeper in the church and found out that the church was my temple and my temple was my body. And it was believed that when you were conceived, your spirit died and was buried in your body. And that when your body died, it gave your spirit the chance to resurrect itself back into the source from whence it came. But hopefully you live the type of life that you earned your place in a mentor or back into the nun, into the universe. Because science says energy cannot be created nor can it be destroyed. You were here before, you're here now, and you'll be here after. So the question is, what kind of life do you live? So that all of the texts of our ancestors not only talked about death, you see, because everybody that interprets it from an Ice Age mentality, they all say that Kush Kemet or Egyptians were overwhelmed with death. That's not the way to look at it. They were overwhelmed with what to do in life in order to resurrect in death. And so it's the book of the coming forth today by night. You come by night from the darkness of the universe into your mother's womb, and then you leave and you become light. And then you die and you go into the depths of the 12 hours known as the Amduat, and then you rise up through light. That's what the 12 hours of Amduat tell you when they weigh your heart against the feather of Ma'at. It's a beautiful story. It's phenomenal, to tell you the truth. And when you learn the story, brother, there's something that you learn. That you learn to, I'm going to try to put it in a way that can understand. Be ready, willing, and able. Ready to live, willing to kill, and able to die. Malcolm said, sometimes the price of freedom is death. And when you understand, this is what James Brown say, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And see, this is as African people, this has been our story throughout our lives. Our ancestors put their life on the line so that the group could survive. We have to learn that story again. And we have to be ready, willing, and able.
Man.
So much respect to Christianity, brother. But it's the interpretation.
Wow. mind blown, Baba. This was a phenomenal breakdown of the film. Very last question for you. You've been so gracious with your time. Sinners has everybody talking. I had to see it 3 times at the movies. This is the first film in a long time. You had said since Malcolm X, right? We're talking about early 90s where this is truly resonating with our people. With all that being said, how can we and how should we use what we gain from watching this film to better our communities and our people?
As phenomenal as Sinners was,
Mm-hmm.
Sinners concretized, visualized what Black folk have been saying for over 400 years. And it's important that we don't think this is novel and new. It is just a way that a new generation has expressed a story. It's the Osirian drama. It's resurrection. It's life. It's remembering where you came from to understand where you are and to be able to decide where you want to go. And at the end, that ending story was so important because I've always been one for staying in the movie house until they turn the lights on. Because I've always felt to honor everybody that had anything to do with the movie. And so many of us are so satisfied with just the visual that once the visual is done, it's time to go. But I want to know who the grip people were. I want to know who the musicians were. I want to know the locations of the film. I want to know all that. And even in the movie, they're guilty of going too fast. They need to slow that row up so I can see and read, everybody's participation in it. But in this particular movie, I found very interesting, and again, I want to talk to Ryan Coogler's mind, is that they start running the credits, and then they go back into a visual. Okay. But then they go back into the credits, and then they show you another visual. The people that left when the first credits came out, they missed a whole bunch. The people that left after the next credits came, they missed a bunch. But those that stayed until the end got the good word. Medu Nefer, the good word, God's word, the gospel, the spell of God. Because you were able to complete the story because everything that he did was important, including that last visual.
Indeed.
And so my thing is to take that away. Keep on keeping on. It ain't over till we win. The movie wasn't over until the movie was over. And that's what I mean when I say keep on keeping on. It ain't over till we win. I didn't invent that saying. I've heard Dr. King say that. Keep on keeping on. It ain't over till we win. I didn't invent that. I just repeat it because I think it's so important. And I think that one of the things from that movie is that people are there for only a certain type of experience. But then when the other things come in, they can be distracted and go away.
Yeah.
You stay till the end. You finish the task. You finish your course. And you just keep on keeping on. That's one of the things that is a side note to the story of Sinners. But it's a very important part of the story because the story is that you'll miss something.
Yeah.
A shortcut is a cut short of where you need to be. Finish the task. Perfect your craft. That's what Dr. Clark used to always say. Dr. Clark used to always tell me, perfect your craft, which means you're always getting better at what you do. And when is it that you no longer have to perfect your craft? When they put you 6 feet under so that the jackals don't get your body. And he used to always say, besides perfect your craft, he used to always say, be prepared. Because our people are extremely sensitive, extremely spiritual, and extremely intelligent. And they know a fraud when they see one. Because enough inauthentic people have been amongst us. We can smell you. We know you, that you're not authentic. We can want to embrace you because we want to embrace something that you represent, but you don't mean it. And so I think that what we can do from here is to know that, again, that when the two folk come back, when Michael B. Jordan comes back into the bar when the elder brother's playing, the elder brother playing, physically speaking, is older than Michael B. Jordan and the sister. But in reality, he's younger than them. When you think of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, in the beginning of the movie, when they were all who they were, Sammy was young.
He was the youngest one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he stayed to his craft. And his daddy said, if you want to get rid of the devil, you got to give up the music. But he was still playing music at the end. And he had the marks of the nails in his face. He had the scars of life, but he was still doing his thing. So I think these are the kinds of little things that we take away from the movie. Keep on keeping on. It ain't over till we win. And, keep on living. Do what you got to do. It ain't over till we win, man. Our ancestors said that. They emblazoned that in our hearts and tattooed it in our minds for those that have picked up the message. It's us. This is our time now. It's a wonderful time to be alive. I used to always, when my wife and I would be riding, I would always say, like, before the election of 2024, I used to always say, like, I didn't see this coming. I never thought that I would live to see Armageddon. Babylon. But then when it started happening and the election took place, we see what has come. I never say that again because I should have seen it coming. I should have known that it could happen in my generation. But I thought that this was so far removed from reality. It was a wake-up call for me, my brother Caleb. It was a wake-up call for me. And it taught me a lesson. Sister Rosalind Jeffries, the wife of Dr. Leonard Jeffries, when I had a school, it was called the John Henry Clark Institute for Youth that we had established in the 80s. And we invited her in to explain the Neteru and who they were. And she told the story of Ma'at. And I've always told anybody that says, Rosalind Jeffries is going to come talk to us, I would always tell them, ask her to explain to you what Ma'at means, what the feather of Ma'at means, and why is that what's weighed at the judgment scene against your heart. Back in, this was 1987. She told the story of Ma'at and what Ma'at represented. And she said, it's a feather that represents truth and justice and righteousness, balance and harmony, order, arrangement, reciprocity, will go around, come around. But it's a feather. And if you hold it too tight, you'll crush it, the feather. But if you hold it too lightly, the slightest wind can blow it out of your hand. So she said, justice and truth, as we're witnessing it in democracy today, right now, we're seeing this. around the world. The wars. Just another one broke out between India and Pakistan. Same people. Brothers. Just like Ukraine and Russia. Brothers. Truth and justice is the type of thing that you have to hold just firm, but just light, so that it doesn't blow out of your hand, but you don't destroy it. That is what democracy is. Democracy is to be held and respected so you don't crush it, but you don't hold it so lightly. It's a very unique balance that your hand has to have to know truth and justice. And Western civilization doesn't understand that. Okay? One party crushes it, and the other one has his hand open too much. But none of them know the African way, the original way of holding it just so tight. And I think we have a symbol of that individual that knows how to hold it tight, but hold it loose. So I send my prayers, my respect, and my honor to Captain Ibrahim Traore, a brother that's going to revolutionize our people. Revolutionize first himself and then his people. Burkina, they call themselves Burkinades, people of Burkina Faso. But first, we must also honor Thomas Sankara, who renamed it from Upper Volta because it was on the upper part of the Volta River. It means nothing. And named it Burkina Faso. And the way Thomas Sankara explained it is that Burkina Faso means the land of good men and women. Simple, but complex. And so now, in the spirit of Thomas Sankara, we now have Captain Ibrahim Traore. And I think he is one that I pay homage and respect to, as others are joining him. Because you see, the only thing stronger than hate is love. And I think that Africa is on the rise. And I think out of that, African people will rise. And no matter what may happen to our brother, we pray he lives long and healthy and is able to do what he wants to do. He's already set the tone for the future. So, we got this, brother. And I want to tell the young people, your generation, no matter what you see happening, we've been through worse. Yep. We'll handle this. and we'll bring a new way of looking at the world, because Africans in America are clearly the next generation, what I call super sapiens. And they will overcome the superficial sapiens. It's our time. It's your time. Sister Sid's time. Heruneset and all the children. It's yours time. And we are going to make sure, to our best ability, that we put in place something that can make it happen. That I promise.
Baba, thank you so much. That was such a great breakdown of the film. I know we can probably keep going for hours upon hours. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Baba. We appreciate you greatly.
Thank you for the invitation, brother. I look forward to the next time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Baba. And you have a wonderful evening.
You also, brother man. Give my regards to the fam.
All right. Hey, we love you.
Peace.
Peace. Yes, sir.